I do want to go back to the well of the House of Representatives right now, where Representative Paul Gosar, the Arizona Republican, has been censored by the House right now. That will remove him from some key committee assignments. You might recall this after his tweet, anime, if you will, that seemed to show him killing Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and swinging two swords at Joe Biden. Nancy Pelosi is weighing in on this, so let's go to Washington.
Paul Gosar of Arizona be censured. That Representative Paul Gosar forthwith present himself in the well of the House for the pronouncement of censure. That Representative Paul Gosar be censured with the public reading of this resolution by the Speaker. And that Representative Paul Gosar be and is hereby removed from the Committee on Natural Resources and the Committee on Oversight and Reform.
All right. Most of the votes are in right now. Liz Cheney and Kinzinger voted, the two Republicans who voted to censure Gosar. They need him in there to formally make the censure charge. Let's go back. Members are. I do want to go to Chad Pergram right now, what we're seeing play out here and how this process goes, Chad. He's been censored. We lose key committee assignments. What else happens?
Right. Well, this is pretty much it. Paul Gosar now becomes the 24th member in the history of the House of Representatives to be censured. The last was Charlie Rangel, the Democrat from New York, who was censured over a panoply of ethics violations. Censure is one of the three formal modes of discipline in the House. It lies between reprimand and expulsion. The variety of things that people have been censured for in the House of Representatives ranges from cursing out the Speaker of the House back in the 19th century to also selling appointments to military academies. So this is pretty rare. What just happened on the House floor here is that Pelosi read the pronouncement. Gosar presented himself in the well of the House chamber here, and I'm looking here just to see if there's anything else going on the floor here. This doesn't happen very often, so there's not really a book here. He presents himself in the well of the House chamber, and then the Speaker reads the censure resolution, and he is formally rebuked. Now, I should note that this did not go through the ethics process. If you followed the Charlie Rangel situation 11 years ago, that went through a lengthy ethics investigation before the Ethics Committee. It does not have to go like that if the House votes, which is how the House voted today, to censure you. You are thereby censured. The vote was 223 to 207. All Democrats voted in favor of this. There were two Republicans, both members of the 1-6 committee, who voted against their Republican colleague. It was Liz Cheney, Republican of Wyoming, and also Adam Kinzinger. And there was one present on the board. That was David Joyce, a Republican from Northeast Ohio. And I want to contrast this vote to what happened earlier this year when the House of Representatives voted to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican from Georgia, from her committees. There were 11 Republicans who voted in favor of that. So this is much different at this point in time. But again, so he has been censured. They didn't go through the Ethics Committee. If the House votes to rebuke you in this fashion, it happened. And, it played out this afternoon. It was very interesting to watch the tenor of debate on the House floor. It was pretty intense, an exchange between both sides. You had Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader, basically trying to pivot and saying, talking about inflation and gas prices, saying the Democrats were trying to distract from those issues. You had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democrat from the Bronx, who obviously was the target of this video, speaking out against this. She was given a big, long chunk of time, 5 minutes, saying, this is kind of code when they go after women. That was something that Jackie Spear, a Democratic congresswoman from California, that's what she alluded to here. And the other thing that I thought was interesting, and I was surprised that the Democrats didn't do this, you have to keep your language during floor debate within the decorum and parliamentary language within the House. That did not happen at certain times, and you didn't have neither Democrats nor Republicans flagging the other side. One thing that caught my attention that went by the wayside, which Democrats did not flag, you could have your language stricken from the record here, was Lauren Boebert, the Republican from Colorado, came up and talked about Ilhan Omar, the Democrat from Minnesota, and called her a, quote, member of the jihad squad. And that was something that a lot of Republicans said, that the Democrats had not been sanctioning some of their own. Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader, talked about back in earlier this year when you had the Derek Chauvin verdict that Maxine Waters, the chair of the Financial Services Committee, went to Minnesota and made some pretty stark comments about, depending on how the verdict goes, you should go out into the streets. He said that the Democratic leadership did not flag Maxine Waters. And then, of course, Democrats are saying, where is Kevin McCarthy and Steve Scalise, the Republican leaders, not taking on their own members, in particular here, Paul Gosar from Arizona, or back earlier this year, maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene. Neil?
So those Republican leaders, and with the exception of Kinzinger and obviously Cheney, they didn't think that this rose, this action, this drawing, this enemy, whatever you want to call it, the part of Gosar, was elevated to necessarily censoring him. They condemned his remarks and said he apologized, that they should have apologized, but they left it at that. And that became the tussle in the debate as to, if this isn't the kind of thing that gets you censored, nothing should, and then back and forth, back and forth. So in the meantime, I'm just curious, Chad, how long is someone censored for in the event of that? And how, obviously you're put on what I guess would be the legislative equivalent of a timeout chair, but how long are you there, and what can't you do?
Well, a censure is permanent. That's pretty much it. I mean, Charlie Rangel, the way the resolution was written, he was allowed to keep his committee assignments. That wasn't a problem for him. He used to be the chair of the Tax Writing Committee, the Ways and Means Committee. But this one formally removes Paul Gosar from the Oversight Committee and the Natural Resources Committee. So the censure, let's say Republicans win control of the House in 2022 and take charge in 2023. Republicans could decide, because that's a new Congress, could decide to put him back on committees, but the censure remains on his record. And something else I want to address here, at the end of Paul Gosar's remarks, he spoke in his own defense on the floor here, and he said, if I am censured like Alexander Hamilton was, he said, so be it. I should note that Alexander Hamilton, who was Treasury Secretary, was not censured by the House of Representatives. There was an attempt to do that over a banking issue when he was the Treasury Secretary, but they could never garner the votes. And Alexander Hamilton also did not serve in the House of Representatives. You had instances sometimes, especially in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, where they went after cabinet officials and even private citizens, and that was the censure then. The Constitution is pretty clear that the Congress can sanction its own members in the House and Senate and mete out discipline, and that's what happened today. So this goes on Paul Gosar's permanent record. It's probably something that will be in his obituary. Same with Charlie Rangel 11 years ago, December 2nd of 2010. That's when he was censured. And again, this doesn't happen very often. Prior to that, you have to go back to the early 1980s to find a member who was censured. So just 3 in really about the last 40 years, Neil.
If he is reelected to his seat, does the censure then carry on into another term?
Yeah, I mean, it's on your record. Right, you have been censured, but the key thing there is, even if Democrats, let's say Democrats hold on to the House, they could make a decision to allow him to serve on committees. This is the bridge too far that a lot of members on the Republican side of the aisle thought was different about this censure resolution with Paul Gosar. They didn't like the idea that they were precluding him from committees. That's the key part here. If you go back to the Rangel resolution, it didn't say anything about that. It talked about some restitution and some other types of sanctions that they had for Charlie Rangel. But this was very specific. And you saw just how quickly it happens. I remember with the Rangel censure, because again, I've been around here a long time, but I had never seen one. He walked very dolefully down the center aisle. His head was kind of hanging down. There was rapt attention in the House chamber. Nancy Pelosi read the citation and very gently tapped the gavel, and that was it. And everybody just kind of left. I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in the House chamber. This went very fast, but it was a little more animated this time around, where you have a Republican speaker admonishing a Democratic speaker admonishing a Republican member, especially someone like Paul Gosar, who obviously the Democrats are very displeased with about sending out this anime video, which they believe depicted Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Indeed. All right. Thank you very much for that. Chad Pergram here.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.